Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fresh Perspectives podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Lauren, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. When was the last time that you truly felt like part of a local community? Not just a group chat, not just a page you were following, but an active, included member of a group. If you had to think about that for a second, my bets are that you are not alone. I think it's such a reality that a lot of us are more connected than ever on social, but lonelier than we like to admit in real life. And I think a big part of this is that we've stopped being intentional about how we find our people. We scroll and follow pages that look interesting, that promise lots of new friends and lots of community, but we show up and we feel lonely because these are not our people. This episode is all about changing this. We're going to talk about why intentional community is so important and what it actually looks like. We're also going to talk about what to look out for when searching for and joining communities, especially communities that have originated online. And I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to find community. So let's get into it. The first tip on finding community that I have for you is being intentional about it. It is so easy to join the first group that you find online. But what's really going to create meaningful relationships is intentional community. What I recommend doing is sitting down and thinking about the kind of people that you want to meet. What values do they have? What lifestyles do they lead? And then I want you to think about activities that bring to life these values. For example, I like running. And what I like about running is that running has connected me with a group of mentally tough people. And I love that quality in a friend. I love connecting with people who are okay doing hard things, who are encouraging me to try my best even if I fail, and who are there for me on the races that I win as well as the races that I don't. So when I moved to New York City, it was no surprise that I looked for run clubs because I identified this value as something that was meaningful to me, and I used run clubs as a vehicle to find these types of people. Now, this can be totally different for you. Maybe you value curiosity, so you're going to look for something like a lecture series at a museum or something at your local library. Or maybe you like people who like to strategize and play games like chess. I really encourage you to not only think about what you like doing, but think about the values and the traits that these activities bring and the types of people that they bring. And then it's all a game of experimentation. I liked running, but New York City has so many different run clubs, and finding one that suited me was a process. I had to go to a lot of different clubs and try a lot out. I ultimately ended up making my own run club, which I will talk about in a creating community episode later on. But it was really trying out all these different communities and figuring out where I fit and then identifying what was missing and building a community around that. My second tip is to be weary because not all communities are what they seem. While I would like to believe that all communities are built with the intention of creating connection, that is simply not the truth, especially in the age of influence. You always want to be careful that you're not joining a community that is trying to sell you something. And I don't mean something like an MLM. Obviously, those are a lot easier to identify. But it is important to know who founded the community and what their intention is. I have seen communities where you think you're joining for friendship, but it's actually a community that is preying on people's loneliness and people's trust, and then quickly flipping that and doing things like affiliate link posting or charging an exorbitant amount to attend an event. So just make sure that your desire for community isn't taken advantage of. And there's lots of ways that you can look for this. You want to make sure the founder is accessible. You want to make sure the founder is somebody who seems like they have good intentions. You want to make sure the community has grown organically over time and hasn't just sprung up overnight. And you want to make sure that if you're giving any money to a community, that it feels right and that it feels proportionate to the experience that is being provided. My tip here is to trust your gut. You can usually tell the difference between a community that wants your attention and one that actually wants you. You deserve to be treated as a community member and contributor and not treated as a customer. Now that you know what communities to be wary of, how do you actually find communities that are worth joining? This is where my practical advice comes into effect. And this is based on my own experience moving to a large city and integrating there. My first tip is to look in places like Facebook. My local neighborhood has a lot of Facebook groups that actually popped up during COVID when people were looking for community. What was so cool is this started as a Buy Nothing group. Buy Nothing is Facebook communities where people give away items. Instead of putting them out on the curb, they ask if anyone in the community would like an item. It's totally free. And our community really took off during COVID, so much so that people were asking questions like, hey, does anybody have advice on where to go for a doctor? Does anyone, run? And would anyone like to run with me? And this caused that Facebook group to have so many spin-off groups. So there was a connection group, there was a group for people who love Broadway. And so I think a local Buy Nothing group, while it is for giving away items, can also be an opportunity to connect with your neighbors. So I encourage you, if you just moved someplace new, to look on Facebook and see if there's any groups. This is actually how I started my run club, was through posting in my local Facebook group. And just when people were looking for a run club who had an inclusive vibe, I would comment, and I grew my group pretty organically. But again, I'm going to talk about that in a future episode. Also, finding activity-based groups. So whether that's a run club, a book club, a cooking class, like I said before, the activity will filter for the personality trait before you even show up. Another way is volunteer opportunities, which, when we're talking about intention and people who are showing up for the right reason, this puts you in a room with people who are motivated by something beyond themselves. And speaking from experience, that was one of the first type of groups that I joined when I came to New York City. It was a volunteer bookstore, and I can just tell you that the vibes were totally different than any group that I've joined since then. It really brings to light some amazing personalities and forges some really amazing bonds. So definitely look into volunteering. And this last tip might sound a little old-fashioned, but I've heard since COVID, this is becoming more of a thing again. And that's just going up to people. So if you see somebody in a cafe reading a book that you love, or you're watching your favorite team at a bar, simply having a conversation with the person next to you. And you don't have to have that conversation with the motive that you're going to be best friends, but you never know what a simple conversation can lead to. Maybe you talk about that book and you have other books in common, and you have more than books in common, and maybe you want to get together with this person because this is a connection point. And maybe that conversation goes nowhere. But you never know. And I think what I've heard from a lot of people is that they don't want to feel creepy when they talk to strangers in public. And I think if you come at it with the right vibes, giving a compliment is always a great way to initiate a conversation. When you see somebody in the physical world that relates to you, that's an opportunity to connect with them. I'll leave you with this. Community doesn't happen by accident in the year 2026. You have to be really intentional about what you're looking for. You have to be honest with yourself when the vibe of a community that you found online seems to be more performative than it is offering you anything tangible. The right community for you is out there. It may take some time, it definitely takes some intentionality, and it will take some searching. But I believe that you can find your people. And sometimes you might be the one who has to create a community. But more on that in a future episode. This has been another episode of the Fresh Perspectives podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Lauren, and I can't wait to speak with you soon.